Another application of game theory is to look at some of the problems that can arise with certain types of goods. To get at this, first we're going to break any good into one of four categories. This is based on two different traits. First is excludability. We'd say that a good is excludable if it's possible to prevent someone from benefiting from a good. Now note the grand majority of goods we're used to dealing with on a day-to-day basis are excludable. That is, it's relatively easy to prevent somebody from getting any benefit from it. Here we could imagine something as simple as a haircut. Right? After all, it is impossible for somebody to get a haircut without someone explicitly allowing them to. Right? So it's very easy to say, no, I'm not going to cut your hair, and then they don't get the benefit of the haircut. Right? Now there are some goods that are non-excludable. For example, things like off-the-air radio or television waves. Right? Then anybody with the right receiver can tune in and get that signal. Right? So that we would call non-excludable, and that it's not possible to prevent someone from benefiting from that good. The other trait will be rivalry. Now, if a good is rival or rivalrous, we would say that one person's benefit diminishes another. Right? So if one person has that good, somebody else cannot have it at the same time, or use it at the same time, or at least to the same extent. For example, with something like an apple, if I eat an apple, you cannot also eat that same apple. Right? So my benefit diminishes your benefit, and vice versa. Now, there are goods that are what we would call non-rival or non-rivalrous. That would be the case, once again, think of off-the-air radio waves. If I tune into a particular station, that doesn't make it more difficult for you to tune into a particular station. If I listen to a particular song, that doesn't prevent you from listening to that exact same song. So, there is this rivalry, this non-rivalry. Right? We can classify goods in one of these two ways, and there's this excludability or non-excludability. We can classify goods according to either of those. Now, using these two traits together, we can classify goods into these four categories. A good that is rival and excludable is what we call a private good. The grand majority of goods we deal with are private goods. Something like a chair, it's clearly rival in that when I'm sitting in it, it makes it more difficult for you to sit in it. At the same time, it's excludable. It's possible to prevent people from taking advantage of a particular chair without too much difficulty. So it's a private good. Now, there are some goods that we would call a natural monopoly type of good. That's if it's excludable and also non-rival. It's excludable, so it means that I can force somebody to pay to benefit from the thing. But because it's non-rival, it means producing a very small quantity of it can actually serve a very large number of people. Here we have in mind things like cable signals. Right? It is possible for a cable company to say, no, we're not going to send you any signal to my house because I've not paid them. At the same time, it's not that difficult for them to send exactly the same signal to multiple houses. And so it is non-rival in that one person's benefit doesn't have to diminish another's, while it is also excludable. So natural monopolies will tend to result in that case. For the non-excludable goods, it is possible that maybe they're rival. That is, it's non-excludable, so you can't prevent somebody from benefiting, but if somebody does benefit, it hurts somebody else's possible benefit. This is what we call a common goods. If you hear of the tragedy of the commons, that's where this happens. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The last category would be something that's non-rival and non-excludable. It's non-excludable, meaning it's impossible to prevent somebody from benefiting from the good. At the same time, it's non-rival, so if they benefit from it, it doesn't diminish anyone else's benefit. Typically, we would say public goods include things like, say, national security, where if the army's out there protecting my house, it doesn't prevent them from also protecting your house, so it's non-rival. At the same time, it's non-excludable. It's very difficult to say, well, I'm going to protect my house without protecting my neighbor's house at the same time. It's a non-excludable, non-rival. We'd call that a public good. Now let's turn to some of the problems faced in a market for a public good. Right, the public goods problem really comes down to how do you convince somebody to pay for it. So in this case, we have Bill and Sandy. Bill and Sandy are looking at this particular public good. If it's provided at all, it provides a $15 value for each of them, for a total of $30 of value. It costs $20 to produce the thing. So now if both of them decide that they're going to pay their fair share, each of them pays $10, then we end up producing the thing. It provides a $15 value for each of them, so they're each ahead $5. I got a $15 value, I paid $10 for it. But if neither of them pay for it, then they don't get any value, but at the same time, they didn't pay any cost. Now, where things are kind of interesting is if one of them pays and the other doesn't. So if Bill pays, for him to actually provide the good, he has to pay $20. But he only gets $15 of value from it. So Bill is worse off by $5 of value. Meanwhile, he can't prevent Sandy from benefiting from the good, it's non-excludable. So Sandy gets this $15 benefit from the good being provided, but doesn't pay for it. And that's where the problem will tend to come in. So Bill thinks about, should he pay for this good or not? Right? If he believes that Sandy is going to pay for it, then Bill shouldn't. After all, he can get the good anyway. So he can get a $15 benefit if he doesn't pay, and just free ride on what Sandy's providing, or he could get only a $5 benefit by paying his share of $10. If he believes that Sandy's not going to pay, then he could take a $5 loss by paying for the good and getting $15 of value, but it costing him $20, or he could just decide not to pay and at least break even. So in either case, Bill is better off not paying for the good. If he believes Sandy's going to pay, then he's better off free riding. If he believes that Sandy's not going to pay, he certainly doesn't want to be free ridden on. While Sandy faces exactly the same set of incentives. If Sandy believes that Bill is going to pay, Sandy certainly doesn't want to pay. Free riding is better. If Sandy believes that Bill isn't going to pay, then Sandy doesn't want to be the one paying so that Bill can free ride. So we end up with an under-provision of public goods. Right? Even though it would make sense for both of them to pay for the thing and for them both to get a $5 benefit for each of them, that isn't what ends up happening. Because of the possibility of free riding, nobody pays. As a result, the good is never provided. Right? This can also be described as a case of privatized costs with socialized benefits. That is, the cost is paid privately by an individual, while the benefit is enjoyed across all of society. Right? The socialized benefit privatized cost tends to be tied with this problem of under-provision for the good. Nobody wants to pay the cost, everybody wants the benefit. But since nobody wants to pay the cost, it ends up not being provided. Right? Or we can also call this the problem of free riding. Since everyone wants to free ride, nobody actually provides a ride. As a result, there's too little of this public good. Now, this is generally where you'd hear an argument for, say, going out and taxing people to provide things like national security or national defense. After all, what we can see here is that if we could force both Bill and Sandy to pay the $10 each, they would actually be better off. Right? So that's kind of the argument for using taxation in order to provide public goods. Now, one thing I would say here is that I think immediately going to that as the solution is not particularly creative. We live in a world where we have things like Kickstarter, where it is possible to make my payment for a good conditional upon somebody else paying for the good. After all, we know with Kickstarter, we have a number of people that come together that decide they're going to fund this good, and they have to reach some target. If other people aren't willing to give enough for that target to be reached, I don't have to pay anything. So we can imagine Bill and Sandy setting up the same kind of scenario in which the only case in which either of them would pay would be if both of them are willing to pay. And that would also make sure that the good gets provided. So I think there are solutions beyond something very simple like the government stepping in, taking money away from you and giving this good that they hope that you value. Given that governments do have something of an information problem there, and they don't actually know, are you not paying for it because you want a free ride, or are you not paying for it because you actually don't want it? That's a hard thing for governments to tell, that solutions like Kickstarter can get around. Now let's turn to the tragedy of the commons. With the common good, remember it's non-excludable, but it is rival, which means you can't prevent somebody from using the thing, but if they use it, it does make it less valuable to other people. So let's suppose in the simple case that use provides $15 of value for everybody that uses it, while each person's use destroys $10 of value to everybody, whether you use it or not. In that case, if both Bill and Sandy use the thing, they each get $15 of value, but each of them have lost $20 of value, because they have $10 from their own use, $10 from the other person's that gets destroyed. If neither of them use it, they're both at zero. Now, if one of them uses it while the other one doesn't, whoever uses it is $5 ahead. They got $15 of value from use, lost $10 of value from destroying the commons to some degree, but on the whole, $5 ahead. The one that doesn't use it ends up $10 behind because all they experience is that the commons were destroyed by $10, while they don't get any benefit for themselves. That being the case, we can examine the incentives. Well, Bill says, if Sandy's going to use the thing, I may as well use it. If I use it, I at least get some value from the thing for myself, even as I'm destroying it, but better to lose $5 of value and be able to use it than to lose $10 of value and not use it. Meanwhile, Bill says, if Sandy isn't going to use it, then I may as well use it. I'm adding more value to myself than I'm destroying value, so I end up better off on the whole. Sandy faces exactly the same incentives. If Bill uses it. Sandy says, well, I sure want to use it too. I'm going to take a loss anyway. It may as well be a small loss. And if Bill doesn't use it, then I certainly want to use it because the benefit that I gain is greater than the loss. So there's a tendency here for both Bill and Sandy to use the commons, despite the fact that on the whole they are destroying more value than they're creating. Right. So when we look at that, we see they both use it, they both end up $5 behind. They'd be better off if neither of them used it. This is the problem that arises when we have socialized costs and privatized benefits. In this case, using the thing allows for benefit to accrue to me individually, while the costs are socialized. Right? This cost is actually destroying $20 of value total. Right? Only 10 of that is experienced by me, 10 is experienced by other people. The result in this case is that we tend to see overuse. Right? People really are going out there trying to grab up and use this thing. As a result, we have the tragedy of the commons, and the commons are run into the ground. Right? We really use this resource up very, very quickly to the point of its own destruction. Now, the solution here is actually remarkably simple, and that's find some way to make the common good excludable. Normally, this is something that is actually possible. It's just a matter of bothering to do it. We can imagine, say, a forest. Right? A forest that has fruit trees in it. Right? Now, according to the tragedy of the commons, this forest is going to end up overused. Right? People are going to pick every apple off of it. Eventually, the apple trees are not going to be reseeding, so they're going to end up dying off. Right? You're going to have to find some way to keep that from happening. A way to do that would be to build a fence around the forest, right, and charge people admission, or perhaps charge people for the apples that they take out. Right? Find some way to charge people for the benefit that they're accruing. But in order to do that, we have to find some way to make it excludable. Now, normally, just a little bit of creativity allows us to take any good that is currently non-excludable and to make it excludable in some way. Even if we think of something like a lot of public goods, like radio waves. Radio waves are technically a public good, and they're non-rival. I can tune into the same radio station that you can without preventing you from doing it, or anyone else for that matter. It's also non-excludable. Anyone with a receiver can pick up that radio wave. So what we did there in order to pay for it is realize that the good is not the radio wave itself. Instead, the good is access to all of these people that can listen to the radio. So we found a good that is excludable, is rival, that is advertising. I can refuse to run your advertisement. Right, that's excludable. It's rival. If I'm playing one advertisement, I cannot at the same time be playing another advertisement on that same station. Right? So we found some other good that is excludable and rival and used that to fund this public good. We can do the same kind of thing here with the tragedy of the commons. Find something that is excludable about the commons and do that. Right? Find some way to exclude. We see that with things like, say, roadways. Right? Now, technically, it is somewhat difficult to prevent people from using a roadway. Right? So you might say, well, it's non-excludable. Yet at the same time, we have very few people that don't bother to register their cars. Right? Instead, the government has found a way to make it excludable. If you're going to drive on it, you have to have a driver's license, and you also have to register your vehicle that's going to be on the roadway. Right? If we catch you not having either of these two things, then you're in serious trouble. Right? That's just a form of making something that might naturally seem non-excludable, make it non-excludable through some way. And then that can solve the tragedy of the commons. By taking the cost, it's no longer socialized, now it's privatized. If you have privatized benefits and privatized costs, then we tend not to see overuse. So here we see that game theory can be used to describe some of the problems that arise with public goods and with the tragedy of the commons. We can think about it in this game theoretic Nash equilibrium kind of way.